to episode number 366 of the West Tigers podcast. And the West Tigers podcast brought to you by the West Tigers Podcast Forum. Make sure you join the discussion at westtigerspodcast.com.au. Just click on to forum and join us there and have your say. Steve's here and Gary's here. I will say, gentlemen, there's a touch of summer in the air in Sydney. Probably Steve's been experiencing warmer air in Byron Bay. But here in Sydney, we're getting a little bit of a glimpse of summer. It is November, and that means there is also a little touch of optimism in the air for West Tigers fans. Gary, the news today, Terrell May signing with the West Tigers, just sort of changes the momentum a little bit in terms of that optimism. There was a few people that were worried about our prospects, but I think that's sort of swayed it a little bit.
Yeah, I was one of those people that was worried about our prospects going into the next season. I had a look at our forward pack a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it was still quite lacking, especially in the middle. And I spoke, our last pod we had, I spoke quite heavily about how important Terrell May could be to us, and I'm really pleased to see that signing get done today. Close to signing get done. They've agreed to terms. I think it's a really important step forward and gives us a chance next season that I didn't think we had without him coming across.
There's a gauge that you can use for West Tigers fans and what they're feeling, optimism, pessimism. It's called Eddie Otto, and Eddie Otto may be joining us. Eddie was on a self-imposed ban till, I think it was March or August or something next year. But the signing of Terrell May have coaxed Eddie out of his cave somewhere, and he may be joining us shortly. Steve, I was going to ask you the question or make the point with you, because it is one thing that you've spoken pretty strongly about on the pod, and that's like-for-like replacement. We lost Stefano. We were concerned that there didn't appear to be somebody coming in to take that place. I guess you've got to commend the West Tigers admin. They've done what looks like maybe even a slightly improved deal here, with the money being apparently less than what we were offering Stefano. So like-for-like, it is the new West Tigers, hopefully.
Yeah, it is the new West Tigers, Joel. That's for sure. If the money is right, getting Terrell May for around that $650 a season mark is awesome. Comparing that to Stefano on $800, it is like for like. We're getting a player that has got proven form behind him, and we've lost a player that wasn't performing. So, is it like for like? We're probably coming out better off from a number of perspectives there, though I will add a caveat. I do think Stefano will be a better player in 25 and will have a similar impact for Melbourne as what Terrell May will have for us. But it's a great signing, and it does show that, you get Jerome Luai in, you get a couple of others in, and all of a sudden other players look at us as a more favourable destination. And maybe Richo does have that magic, and he's using his experience to get guys over the line. Because in the past, we've talked and hoped and hoped, and at the end of the day, these signings fall over. Well, this one looks like it's not going to, but it's not actually signed yet, John.
We'll talk about that in a minute, Gary.
For me, that comparison between Steph and Terrell, it's a fairly apt one, because Steph's the one who's walking out of the club and Terrell's coming into the club. So there is a big comparison to be made there. For me, Steph hasn't had a season that compared to the season Terrell May had last year. Now, I think he's got all the potential in the world, and I think Terrell's produced last season what we're hoping Stefano would. Now, he may go down and do that at Melbourne, but what I've seen from him, he couldn't do it at our club. And he didn't have the ability to do it last year, and he didn't have the ability to do it the year before either. So for me, we're getting someone who has shown they can perform at that level for less money than we're offering a guy who we were hoping would perform at that level. So regardless of what happens with Stefano next year, I've got to look at that as an upgrade. And then when you have a look that you've also got Royce Hunt, who I'm sure we're going to discuss a little bit later on as well, that's a vast improvement for our middles, for our props. Our prop rotation, with the addition of Hunt and May, is far superior to what we were looking at with Stefano sitting there last year. So for me, it's a big plus moving into season 2025.
I know I've made the point before, but that finals series from this year really stood out to me, the importance of having those agile, quick play the ball front rowers and props. So I think the days of the game having and being dominated by big lumbering 120 kilo props is over. I think that's why this is a better replacement for Stefano. I think Stefano will do well in Melbourne. It's a good team. Like pretty much, what is it? What's his name? I don't mean to be discourteous, but the Nick Meaney effect. I mean, Nick looks like a world beater in that team. I mean, I'm sure Stefano will be a good first grade player in that team. But I think for the way the game's going and for teams like ours, I think somebody who is more agile and more able to get that quick play of the ball and keep that ascendancy going, I think it's going to be a real addition to our offense. And it also makes me think that Tim Johansson might be a significant contributor to our pack next year, even though he is very raw. I liked some aspects of his game as well. So I don't know, Steve. The days of the big guys, the Nelson, Asafa, Solomonas, the Stefanos. I mean, the game as I said in that final series just didn't suit them at all.
Yeah, look, I think Terrell May is a great signing, and he's a very good front rower, and he'll do a great job, and it's a huge plus for us, and it makes a big difference, and it's going to lift our forward pack massively. I still do think we are missing that apex experience front rower to lead the pack. I'm not sure that Terrell May is going to lead the pack. I think he's going to add to the pack. I don't know that we've got Appy, who's our forward leader, but he's not a big bopper thumping into the defensive line or putting on huge tackles himself. I still think there's a place for that type of player in the game. I don't disagree with you, Joel. I think the agile forward, the guy who can play tight and play ball a little bit, is like your Yo type player is really prominent in the game now. But I would like, if we're going to look at adding to our forward pack down the track, I'd still like to see that really tough experience, hard running front rower to add to it. That's not taking away from the signing. It's a great signing.
Look, for me, I think Nelson showed it being missing in that grand final. There's still a place in the game for that big guy. But the thing for me is they need to be able to play decent minutes. You can't really have that forward leader, that big aggressive prop, who's playing less than 40 minutes a game. And that's where it's at. For me, it's a combination between the two. You need that big guy who can dent the line, who has a bit of aggression, who provides impact. But he needs to be getting through 40, 50, 60 minutes a game. And that's what I think you get with Terrell. And I don't think he's that forward leader at this point in his career, at least anyway. But what you do get is a guy who has decent impact, who can bend the line, but can also push out really good minutes. Now, the last thing I'll say in regards to that forward leader, the guy's 25. He's coming into the best years of his career for a prop. And if he's going to develop into that type of player, now's the time he's actually going to do that. You don't see many guys in that, unless you're a Payne Haas freak, you don't see many guys in that 20 to 25 age range who are really that forward leader of your club, who are really that dominant player. And I'm not going to sit here and say May's going to develop into that player, but if he's going to, it's the next 2 years that he's going to do that. So hopefully we can provide the structure and the guidance around him to develop into that sort of player for our club. But if he doesn't, the 650 that's been reported, that's your second tier prop anyway. So if he's not quite at that level, I don't think we've overpaid for what we'd get from him anyway. So I think this signing is a really good signing because if he develops into that player that is leading your pack, great, we've got him on a really good deal. But if he doesn't, I don't think we've gone and busted the bank to get him over to the club.
Well, I suppose that second tier prop analogy sort of, talks to my point of still not having that dominant leader in the pack. But I'm going to say David Klemmer, come on down, right? Like David Klemmer is not over the hill. He's not a busted prop. He's still capable of being that leader, I believe. And now that he's going to have Terrell May next to him, and he's going to have, possibly Bateman and Fainu and Bird and someone like Hunt coming off the bench, the pack is immeasurably stronger. That gives Clemmer, surely he's not going to be thinking he's got to do all the hard work. Now he's got others around him who can do that. And this is the time for him to put his foot down and say, righto, I'm going to be the leader. I'm the ex-State of Origin player. I'm the experienced guy here. If he's not injured and if he's fresh and capable, he needs to be that guy for us now.
I'm checking the calendar. It's November. Eddie Otto's entered the room. Eddie, I thought we weren't seeing you to February, March, April. What's brought you out? What's got you here tonight?
Well, things change, Joel, as you know. One of my favourite saying is when new evidence presents, you can always change your opinion. So I do have one rant, Joel, so you're going to have to put up with that later. That's one reason I wanted to come on.
Okay.
But have you got a question for me or not?
I was going to ask you, what do you make of today's news of Terrell May, 3 years?
Well, as Gary would know, particularly, I've done a little bit of a U-turn on this. Not a complete U-turn, but when his name came up, I thought, for one, we're no chance, and two, I thought red flags galore. Why the Roosters letting go a good prop? And if you're not motivated at the Roosters, what chance are you of being motivated at the Tigers when you're on your first 3-game losing streak? So I had some red flags, but then I've listened to a few podcasts and read a lot online, actually. And initially I went to Roosters fans, and they were quite miffed about losing him. So that encouraged me, because I'll be honest, I don't like watching Roosters games because I hate them, so I turn it off generally. So I probably underestimated just how highly he's rated as a player. And I also, considered a bit more just the impact it would have on guys like Clemmer, who, like I agree with Steve, has more to offer, and we haven't got the best out of him. And particularly the signing of Royce Hunt, who I was very worried about. But, this possibly brings him back to a bench role or a limited minutes role with Terrell May playing longer. Now, I've got a couple of people say to me, when has a signing like this ever worked out? A guy who's a bit of a wild card, and they rarely have at our club. So I'm not convinced it's going to be a smash success just because of what's happened in our club over the last 10 years. We've had guys like BJ Leilua and Russell Packer and Josh Reynolds, who are good footballers. Some would say they were past their prime, but like I think I told Gary, BJ Leilua was centre of the year in 2016 and 2018, and I think he joined us in 2020, and he was washed the minute he came here. And that's probably not a talent thing. So my end conclusion is it's a risk we couldn't afford not to take in the position of our forward pack. And a player like this, Richo's said the last few months, something will drop out of the tree, and I was starting to, wait under that tree, getting really angry, going, there's nothing happening. And now all of a sudden you've got this potential, elite front rower on better money or less money than Stefano, a direct replacement. So, yeah, it's a risk I don't think we could afford to knock back. I'm still hopeful rather than confident that it'll work out, just because of those red flags around potentially his character and his love for the game. But still exciting.
Eddie, was that your rant?
No,
that's not your rant.
No,
far out. That was Gary-esque.
Thank you, Steve.
That was the longest introductory comment I've ever heard.
Well,
I think he could have saved a lot of time, a lot of research,
yes.
A lot of reading other forums by just listening to what I said like 5 weeks ago, Eddie. You wasted all this time.
I'm not going to say you were right, Gary, but I'm saying I've just slightly shifted opinion.
I'm closer to right than you were.
So yeah, I'll leave it with that for now, Joel. But it's done. It's been done pretty quickly, which is another big tick for Richo. These things, once they get going, there's not much scuttlebutt for 3 weeks. It's done. So it's great.
Gary never realised he was so influential on you, Eddie. So that's an interesting one. Agreed to terms, as you mentioned before, Steve. Wasn't a full he signed, but clearly he's going to be here. What do you make of that? We're clearing some space still. There's not a spot for him at the moment. It was sort of a strange way to put it.
I don't know what to make of it. Like I said earlier today, right? Like Sione Fainu, like just if I go around a little bit to come back to your question, like Sione Fainu doesn't have a contract for 25, and there's been no talk of any other club approaching him, offering him a deal, and he hasn't put the feelers out that we've heard about, which is really weird. And so I have to say, what's going on with Fainu? We are supposedly got 29, and therefore there's a spot for May, yet that hasn't been filled. And I don't believe for a second it's because he hasn't got himself over to Concord to sign the bit of paper, right? I can only think that the Miller situation is unresolved, and therefore that 30th spot is not yet actually legally available, is maybe a better way to put it. And I can only think that with both May and Fainu and possibly others, that there is something going on behind the scenes that is very close to being done as far as releasing a couple of players, that these players are going to be guaranteed. Because you can't put out, marketing like they did today, welcoming this guy to our club, and then say, oh, by the way, we don't have a spot. So there's something going on that we don't know, and that's my guess at it.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Steve. I would bet that the hold-up is the Miller situation, that the fact that he's talking about taking legal action, I'm guessing that spot isn't officially available yet. So I think there's a hold-off in regards to that. With Sione Fainu, I still think he's another couple of spots away from actually being where we should be offering him a position. I think even after whoever we get off the books to get May in, once that's all sorted out, I still think there's another signing we need to make before we start looking at putting Sione Fainu on a contract for next year. So I agree. It seems really odd to me that there's been no talk about him going elsewhere, and it appears like he's been promised a position. That's what it looks like from the outside looking in.
Has to be. It absolutely has to be.
I think his season was good enough last year that if he was truly off contract, he would have offers from other clubs. His season was good enough for that. So there must be something kind of promised to him. But I hope we're doing this the right way, because I think there's still priorities before putting Sione Fainu under contract. And that's not to diss the season that he had. I thought he had a fantastic season last year. But we've got to target where the holes are in our roster. And at the moment, that kind of extra bench prop probably isn't the biggest area of need going into next season. So I'll be interested to see what they kind of do with that, because, as I said, I think there needs to be 2 positions freed up before you're actually giving him a contract.
I'm going to make a bold prediction. I've already predicted, as you guys know, the West Tigers to finish 8th, and that was before Terrell May signed. My prediction is that John Bateman, this will be the last West Tigers podcast with John Bateman, a West Tigers player. I think that's where that space is going to go.
I'm still not convinced, Joel. I have a feeling that he could still be here next year.
Eddie, I'm going to, in that same part of the pack, we spoke a little bit about like for like with Stefano being swapped out for May. One area where we haven't like for like swapped at this stage is Isaiah Papali'i in the back row. There still seems to be a hole there he did play a lot of lock last year, but a position there, a spot there in the back row, which I think still has a question mark on it. That's probably got to be priority number one, aside from obviously getting a few players off the books.
Yeah, I agree. I'd love to get Hetherington from the Broncos. I don't know whether that's ongoing, but he'd be a perfect potential lock. Maybe you could slot Jack Bird into the back row. I don't, as much as I talk up Seyfarth, he's not a starting back rower. And please, Bateman, you can't trust this bloke. I agree with you, Gary, or whoever said that. He's going to turn around in a week and say, "Oh, I don't mind the look of this side now." But I'm sorry, you've done your dash, mate. You've pissed off us on us once and gone to England, Next 2-game losing streak, he'll do the same thing. He'll throw the toys out of the cot. So I don't care how good a footballer he is. He's a bad egg in that dressing room. So I want him out. I want him nothing to do with preseason games, whatever. And there's no turning back, just in my opinion, on John Bateman. But at the moment, that back rower spot opposite Samuela is probably up for grabs, and I don't have the answer. But I'd love one more signing, potentially a lock. I'll ask Gary, could Tyrone May potentially play lock?
Oh, he definitely could. He's got a really good offload. He's got a decent pass. There's a couple of Roosters games this year where he's throwing cutout passes and stuff. So there is some talent there. I probably prefer him in prop, but I think at a stretch you could play him at 13. The one I wanted to agree with you, Eddie, is I think Hetherington would be ideal. I think that's the next signing to make, and not for next year. I'd be getting sorted out 2026 straight away. Get that announced, and then put a little bit more pressure onto the Broncos, and see if they still want to keep him when he's coming to the West Tigers in 2026. So if we could get him across for next year, that turns that pack into a really good pack. And I agree, I'd probably shift Bird to that edge and have him playing on that edge with Hetherington at lock. I think that makes a really strong forward pack and gives you plenty of options with your bench as well. So Hetherington, I think, would be massive for the club for next season, but even for 2026.
John Bateman would look good in a Broncos jersey. A bit of too much sunshine up there for him. He'll probably get a suntan. But I think he'd work well with Madge up there at Brisbane. And if we could get Hetherington back, that'd solve a few problems. Of course, we're talking about Terrell May, not Tyrone May.
Sorry.
I've made the mistake earlier on, I think. The brothers, Gary, I think you've had something to do with one of the May brothers at some stage in a coaching capacity.
I actually coached both Tyrone and Terrell when they were very young. Terrell was very young. Mount Druitt family, I taught him Mount Druitt. So
what do you think about because people are putting two and two together, saying maybe there's the possibility of having the brothers all here?
Look, I think it really depends what happens with Taylor's court case. The allegations that have been, I don't know if it's got the charges, but the allegations against him aren't very nice. So I'd like to see that get cleared up first, but depending on what happens with that, I think that really makes a decision for you in that regard. So for me, he's a great footballer, a great outside back for Penrith and could make a real difference to our side, but he needs to get the other stuff in his life sorted out first before I'd be going anywhere near that.
And having coached Terrell May, if he comes and he's hopeless, we know who to blame. We'll just blame you, Gary.
Yeah. My under eights coaching of him will be the reason he's poor next year, Eddie. I'm sure Eddie will raise.
I'd say, Joel, that's the reason for his questionable character.
The laziness, especially, Eddie.
Set me up well there, Joel.
Exactly. Yep, that was straight over the net. Steve, the Jerome Luai factor in all of this has to be taken into account. I mean, you sign a guy because he's a good player, but I think with Jerome Luai, we're getting something a little bit extra there, and I think he must have been a big part of this, having been in the camp with May and knowing him and being from the same area. I think that this is the first sign that Luai is here to do more than just play 7, if that makes sense. Yeah,
100%, Joel. I'll go back to what I've said a million times on the pod, right? And one thing is not exclusive of another, right? There are nearly always multiple factors at play. And yet I reckon Jerome Luai's impact and the respect that other players hold for him, and they obviously listen to him, he's been a great influence in getting Terrell May to the club. And maybe the fact that he signed on for us has got other guys looking at the club as well and brought them over. But I also think there are other factors as well. There's also Richardson's experience, his negotiating skills, and that upgrade of professionalism with our administration, which he has the ability to actually get the contract signed, and perhaps they are looking more professional as an organisation to the outside world as well. So I reckon there's multiple things at play there. But can I just go back to Bateman for a minute. I just wanted to make a point. Like you talk about Hetherington for 26, and that's that's really great, and I'm all for that. And gee, if he could come for 25, then this point's redundant, right? But if he does, if Bateman is, as Eddie says, just unsalvageable and he's got to go, and we don't have Hetherington for 25, we are short. And we really, because we don't, I don't think, this is my opinion, I don't want Bird going as an edge back row. I want him to start the season at lock. We've been short a good lock for a long time, and I think Bird could play the role really well. But it means our edge back row, we've got Fainu on one side, and then we're stuck on the other side. And what would happen is Bird would go to the back row, and then we'd be looking back at Seafarth or Twile or someone to come in at lock, which weakens our pack, I think, a fair bit. So, yeah, there's still a fair bit of work to be done there, and I agree Bateman's not the guy, but if we're going to get rid of him, we must replace him.
So when I look at the pack that I'd be going with next year, I have to have Bateman in there at the moment because he's still at the club, and if he's here, we need to find a way to make that work because we need that edge covered, and Bateman's really the only person in our club at this point that can do that. If he's not here, then we either need to go find a lock or we need to go find an edge back rower moving into next season. So I agree fully with you, Steve. Bird only goes to the second row for me if Hetherington's at the club next year. He's in that lock position otherwise. I don't want to see a situation where we're putting Pole or Sione Fainu into that lock role for the majority of the season. And I definitely don't want to see a situation where we're looking at Twile or Seafarth playing that role as a starter either, or as a major contributor to that role throughout the season. So for me, when I look at my pack for next year, I still have Bateman penciled in because I think we need him there at this point because we just don't have the depth and we don't have the quality to not have him there, especially what we're going to be paying him if he's still here. So if he is here, Benji and Bateman need to find a way to make that work for next season because, we need him in that spot.
I don't disagree with you guys on that, but it's like we're picking a side, like we're playing on PlayStation. Like if a bloke doesn't want to be there, is he any value at all? Like if he doesn't want to be there, even if he's the best back rower in the world, which he's not, he's better than what we got. But I just think the risk you run by trying to, it's almost like, not like Ben Hunt with the Dragons because he had a good year, but that thing went on and on and on. He was eventually always going to leave. Like Bateman's less of an influence and more of a disruptor for me.
I don't want him here, Eddie. I want us to sort that situation out so he's not at the club next year. Part of sorting that situation out is finding someone else to fill that edge role, because at the moment we don't have it at the club. So it's either Bateman or we actually get it sorted out, which is what my preference is. At this point, we don't have it sorted out. So at this point, I have to go on what we've got on paper. Sorry, Steve.
No, I was just going to say what you just said. That if I don't want him either, but it can't just be he goes and then we fill from within. We need, because it just mucks up our pack. It weakens our pack a lot.
You mentioned Fanua Pole, Gary, and I might throw this to Eddie. He's a guy that at this point in his career should be lining up for a starting spot. He should be the guy you would think that would be grabbing that 13 jumper, given where he is in his development. I like him. I'm really worried about him defensively, but that says a lot about a few guys like Pole and Matamua. We've put a lot of time and a lot of effort into these guys, and they're still not really ready to grab a starting spot.
You know my thoughts on Matamua, Joel, so we won't talk about him. But Pole, I don't know. I'm starting to get a few of those red flags out about him. He hasn't re-signed, so is he on the outer? Is he deciding he wants to go back to Melbourne? And I don't think he's a starting lock because his defence is poor. It's inconsistent. I think at the moment bench prop's probably his best role for me. Yes, he had flashes last year and he had some good moments, but I think he stood out more because of the fact our pack was poor, not the fact that he was a consistent good first grader at this point.
Look, I'm a Pole fan. I like Pole. For me, he's an out-and-out middle. I like his footwork, especially close to the line. I think he's very dangerous inside the red zone. The issue I do have, and you both raised it, is defensively, he's just not strong enough. That's an area of his game he really needs to improve. If he could improve his defence, I would consider him starting in front of Clemmer. But at the moment, I don't think his defence is quite good enough for that opening sort of 10, 15 minutes. I think he's got a lot of work to do on that. I have severe doubts about him being here for 2026. So I think prop is probably a position where you need to have a look at again for 2026. I think we need to be looking around for those off-contract 2026 prop forwards right now, because I think there's a fair chance that Paul A ends up at Melbourne for 2026, which I will be disappointed about, because he adds a bit of variety to our pack with that footwork, especially close to the line.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see how he goes. It's just a pity that it would be nice if he was the guy that was getting ready to grab that 13 and make it his own. We were going to talk about how our pack might look at this moment, naming our pack as to what we would probably choose at this point ourselves. So I think most of us are going to be in agreement with front row. I don't think there's any point going around the room and asking. May and Clemmer, is everybody on board there? Yep. Obviously Appy at hooker. And then it gets a little bit more. Fainu is obviously a given for one of those positions. At this point, Gary's got Bateman on the right edge because that's just the way that it looks at the moment, and I'd probably agree. Is any Steve or Eddie, you haven't got another suggestion for that right edge? Nobody's putting Adam Dewey in there or Stafford Tower or no.
Tim turned into Tim Sheets.
No wild cards, no.
I think Adam Dewey went to Benji and said he'd be happy to play there. That's his
in reserve grade.
Yeah. No, but look,
do you have? Sorry, Steve. I'll ask you. Do you have like lock is a very taxing position. Like I watched Patrick Carrigan and them; they're broken after games. Like I have concerns about Jack Bird playing lock because of the amount the toll football's taken him. I think he could be a decent lock, but I would bet long odds against that he would go through a whole season playing lock. Yeah,
well, that's probably a good point, and I haven't. Well, it is a good point actually, and I haven't really thought of it from that perspective. I'm impressed with the fact that he's come back early. He's been doing stacks of training.
It looks really fit.
Yeah. He wants the position, and I think he's the exact prototype of the modern lock. I think he's got all the skills. No, he's not 100% the prototype because he maybe hasn't got the build to play tight early in the game. So there may be games where we need to start someone else at 13, bring him into the game. But I want him there. I want him there as a link, attacking link, and he's strong defensively. So I think he'd show up the middle there. But you're right. He has been prone to injury, so that could play a factor. But can you make, once the club's done its due diligence and they've done their tests and they've ticked the box that the guy's fit and ready to go, you've just got to hope, I suppose.
Yeah, for me, I think there's a lot of games where he doesn't play 80 minutes. I think there's a lot of games you slot someone else in there in that role. For me, that ball-playing lock, especially moving into next season, is quite important. When you have a look at our halves, now, Luai did spend a lot of time at halfback last season, but he's predominantly been a 5'8". So giving him a bit of time to transition where there is someone playing that kind of link role, that lock link role, to push him a little bit wider at times, I think will be really benefit his game and his transition from 6 to 7. So I can see a Bird-type player being really important in his development into that 7 role. I do agree. I worry about his body. I worry about him handling the defensive workload throughout the entire season, because that's the big difference. For me, the amount of tackling he's going to have to do next season is probably going to be something that he hasn't done before. And is a lot more than if he was playing a second rower out on the edge. So that, for me, is the concern around that. And I can see at times as putting someone on there, else on to give him a bit of a break with that defensive load. So a fairly good defender going in there and filling that role from time to time, I think could be quite crucial moving into next season. And that's where I guess a guy like Twal, who I don't have in my top 17, but maybe that is a role that he can play, is just spending a bit of time in that role defensively, and shoring that up for parts of the game to give someone like Bird a little bit of a break.
What about this wonder kid we signed 18 months ago, who's turned up to training apparently overweight, Latu Finu? Could he be a wild card at lock, Steve?
Yeah, I've got him in the back of my mind as a future lock. Yeah, if Galvin stays at the club, and we've got Luai locked down for a number of years, I think in the time that Luai's at the club, I'd like to see Latu Finu transition into lock. But coming back overweight, and he's a young bloke who's trying to prove himself, in the top grade, and he comes back, he's slackened off in the off season and come back fat. It's hard to take the bloke seriously at this stage if he's not going to take himself seriously. So he's got a bit of work to do attitude wise, and obviously on the paddock. But he's probably too young yet. What is he? 19? He's only 19.
19. Yeah. He was only 18 this year. I don't even know if he's turned 19 yet.
Yeah, okay. So he's probably still too young to be considered for that role, but I think that's a possibility down the line.
For me, I have him on my bench. Fitness issues aside, whatever happens with that, happens with that. But at this point, I have him on my bench because...
Sorry, Gary, is that ahead of, Talon De Silva?
It is, because Talon De Silva, you can put on and you can play him at hooker. Whereas Latu, you can put him on, you can play a bit of hooker. If you get an injury in the halves, he can cover the halves. And if need be, you can put him into that lock role. So not because I think he's a better player or has a better future than Talon. It's more so that he's just more versatile when you put him on that bench. And I find that hard because I really want Talon getting more and more time in first grade. But maybe playing 80 minutes every week in reserve grade next season is what's best for his development anyway. So, yeah, I can see Latu going into that lock role at some point and probably would spend some time there next season because, I would have him on my bench to kind of cover all of those spots. I think it gives you just more options.
Let's hope those hamstrings are back in tip-top shape. He had a lot of trouble with them last year or this season. I mentioned him earlier, but what about a bolter of Johansson playing lock? Maybe in that defensive role. He is a good runner of the ball. I don't think he has the ball skills I'm looking for from a lock. Not that I've seen a lot of his football, so I do have to state that because he jumped grades last year. He didn't spend that much time in reserve grade. He started the year playing for Ryde Eastwood, I think it was, and then jumped up to playing reserve grade and then got his debut last year. So possibly he could fill that role, but he's also on a train and trial contract, and I don't go into next season looking at train and trial guys as guys I'm relying on. If he makes a big jump next season and fights his way in and shows the form in reserve grade that he should be a starter or he should be in the top 17, then he does that. But I don't really consider him at this point just because of where he is in his career. Let's see how he goes in reserve grade next year before putting too much pressure on him.
Yeah, I just want to make a counterpoint to what Gary's saying there with his bench. I just think Talon De Silva is such a weapon. And when he came off the bench last year, he had such an impact on our attack. There's no denying that, excuse me, Appy is going to need time off the field this year. He can't keep playing 80 minutes. It was just ridiculous last year. And I think when he does go off the field, we want someone who goes into 9. And I suppose it's a bit of a bugbear of mine in selecting benches. Like I want a bloke in at 9 who's going to give quick service. So we're going to have two of the best halves in the competition. The last thing we want is someone going in there who's not a specialist at dummy half and he's getting away poor ball. We've had that happen in the past, and it does impact the halves when that happens. So I want to see Tallender Silver at 14. And if we're going to give Bird a rest, I think we put him on the bench and start the game with a Pole or a Twal. I take the point of Pole's defence. But it's either or. You can't have both of them on the bench, I don't think. Either or. Start the game, and then as the game settles down, Bird comes off the bench and plays 13 for 60, 65 minutes. That's what I'd be doing.
Yeah, I tend to agree in terms of hooker. I don't know if I want Fainu there playing in that role, especially with where Appy is at in his career. Eddie's looks like he's about to drop off his perch. I know you're battling something there, Eddie. You don't look 100%.
Battling lots of things, Joel.
Yeah.
Not just sickness.
So I don't know about you, but when I get sick, I get a little bit pessimistic and a little bit grumpy. Is that the good lead into your rant, or have we covered your rant?
No, you haven't covered the rant, so I'll go ahead. And I don't know if it's fair or not, but I'm just a little bit, I do say I'll switch off in the off-season, but, every 3 or 4 days, Joel, I log on to the West Tigers official website, see what's happening. Is anything happening there? Is there any media manager there? Have they started pre-season? I thought they started 2 weeks ago. So wouldn't it be nice for your members, as Richo says, members come first always, wouldn't it be nice if you could do, a little 2-minute question and answer with the coach, Benji Marshall? I'm sure he's been there the last 2 weeks. Brett Hodgson's back at the club apparently as an assistant coach. You could sit down and have a 3-minute conversation with him. Or you could talk to Lockie Gowan, who's been back ripping and tearing the first 2 weeks. I know Jack Byrne and Royce Hunt started today, so probably a little bit early to get stuff for them. But I just think, Joel, the content game's never been bigger. If you look at, streaming, YouTube, all this stuff, and we have been a club stuck in the mire for 3 years at the bottom of the ladder, and we need every member that we can. And Steve's always gone on about attention to detail and everyone being excellent. Is it just the fact that we don't have enough people in the building to have some sort of content game to get I don't check other clubs' websites, so maybe they're all the same. Maybe there's nothing out there, there's nothing to talk about. They send out 5 pictures at the end of each week. Pre-season training started. Beautiful. And you see those awful new training jerseys they've got. But I just think they could be a little bit better with that, because if Richo's going to talk about members come first and we want to be excellent at everything, surely they just can't wait a month for Luai to drop and, do a 10-minute interview with him. I just think they could be better with updating the fans on what's going on.
Yeah.
So that's my rant.
Not a little bit better, a whole lot better, yeah. Just this is where people start to get excited, and you try and harness that and get people signing up for memberships. You're coming up to Christmas, that conversation start being had, between husbands and wives and people. What do you want for Christmas? And if we're feeling excited, we might say, West Tigers membership. And you're right, it doesn't take a lot of time. You don't even have to really edit it. Just grab a Brett Hodgson, grab a John Morris or Chris Heinington, or, someone, 3 or 4. What are you working on this week? What are some of the standouts? What are our targets this week? That kind of thing. It's not hard, and it does keep fans engaged. And it's funny because, there was the 27-second Jerome Luai video, which just went crazy. You got to keep that momentum going. That's my little rant about it. So I agree, Steve.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys, and I'm not making an excuse for the club. Just throw it out there. I just wonder if it's a cost-saving thing. I wonder if he's not on the and if it is, he should be. But I wonder if he's not on the payroll for the full season. You know what I mean? I wonder if it's like an 8-month.
Probably right. I'm not blaming Chris Warren. I'm just saying I don't even know, Steve, how if other clubs are more engaging. I just think compared to even what we did 4 or 5 years ago, maybe they got cussed because it's a very less engaging.
Yeah, even some video of the guys training, just some generic stuff of them, throwing the ball around, Gary.
Yeah, the only thing we've got is some training pictures. And I think it needs to be more than that. I think we're in a position. A big thing I've said about this club for a long time is we're really poor at selling our vision and our story. And this is just a reflection of that for me. You're a side coming off your 3rd wooden spoon, and we've got Jerome Luai, who's not in the venue yet, and he's not in the club yet, so you can't do a lot with him. But start to build something. Start to build some momentum leading into, and not, I'm sure the boys are training hard and that's all been taken care of, but build some momentum for your fan base. Like, this is a fairly douse fan base, and like, we got a good signing today, and you see how much that's uplifted the fan base this afternoon. A lot more positive talk around the club. So we need to be better in that regard. We need to sell our story and our vision much better than we do, because where we are situated, that's all we really have. All we have is the hope building into the next season that these new signings are going to make a difference. Then we need to start selling that, and we don't sell ourselves well enough.
Well, one thing I was just going to say, it's been pretty obvious that Terrell May is coming our way, probably for 48 hours. Somebody should have grabbed Benji Marshall, because he's been quoted in the press release. Somebody should have grabbed him, put a camera on him for a minute, and said, signing of Terrell May, what does it mean for the team? That sort of stuff. That would be fantastic. Rather than reading the words, just having a short little, we can't wait to see him here, and he's a great guy, and looking forward to welcoming his family, and, don't forget to join up for your membership, because, it's getting exciting. That kind of stuff makes a big difference. Eddie's having a coughing fit, so I will throw to you, Steve, because you had your hand up.
So I just had a look. on the Tigers website now on my phone. And did you say a couple of players came back to train yesterday?
Hunt, Bird, and stuff were there today.
Yep.
Okay, so they've all just started this week, and new to the club, first grade players, exciting, good signings for us. And there's nothing. There's nothing there welcoming them.
There were some pictures released today of training, and they're in those pictures. The only excuse I'm going to give the club at this point is they're quite like, new players coming to the club and getting them out in front of the media is going to generate a little bit of interest. The only pass I'm going to give them is the fact that the major sponsor hasn't been announced yet. So the possibility that they're waiting to really push that sort of stuff until the sponsor can get value out of it is kind of the only pass I'll give them on this, the only caveat I'll put on it. Because maybe they're just waiting to get that new sponsor onto the jersey or onto the training shirt instead of just showing up with the community programs logo on there instead.
It's going to look good, the West Tigers podcast logo on the front of the jersey. I mean, I've said too much. Go, Eddie.
No, I was just going to say, it's hard because, sometimes if they put out a heap of content, it's called fluff, and fans will push back against it. But there's genuine reason to be excited. I've seen some Instagram stuff when we announced the May one, and fans are pumped up. So, it's hard to do it during the season because if you're 0 from 6 or whatever, people are just going to say, go away. But the easiest time to be optimistic is in November because you haven't lost a game. So they should be, like the boy said, we should be building momentum. Can we employ someone to do that, please, West Tigers?
Maybe the club's a little gun shy because you have a look, quite often they'll put information out and especially on Facebook and Instagram, and they just get hammered. They get absolutely smashed by the fan base when they do that.
This is the time.
Yeah. But I'll say even in the last couple of months, they put it out there and they will get from our own fans, well, that's 3 wooden spoons in a row, comments like that onto your stuff. Maybe it's got to do with that. But I do believe there is genuine excitement building amongst our fan base that things are starting to get better. And the club needs to take that opportunity, needs to pounce on that opportunity, because if we lose the first 5 games next season, that opportunity is no longer there.
But I'll make the point, and I think just to put it in a nutshell, if the people inside the walls at Concord don't love the club and don't show that love for the club through what they do, then we as fans are going to feel kind of like what we feel tonight, which is just that little bit sort of let down and a little bit like the club lacks a certain energy. In this day and age with social media, you do tend to get a little bit exposed to other club stuff. And I've got to say, the Panthers, they seem to really do a really good job of it. They seem to be a lot more switched on. And it's easier when you've won 4 premierships, but it seems like the effort is always there and the love for the club is there from the people who work there. And I don't know if sometimes we get the same feeling resonating from the walls at Concord. It'd just be nice to have that. And as I say, the club gets hammered, but nobody would have hammered a 60-second video with Brett Hodgson today talking about what the guys have done this week, or what does it mean to have a guy like May coming to the club? You know what I'm saying. It's not that hard. It just keeps us involved and invested. On a note, well, it is an unrelated topic, but I think we need to have a bit of a chat about the Holman Barnes Group. There's been some developments there in the last few days. I'm not feeling sick. I'm feeling quite well, so I'm feeling quite optimistic. That is my default position, but I am getting a little bit fed up with all of this coming out of the Holman Barnes Group. The latest news was that came out last week. The three directors who have all served on the West Tigers board previously, they're all on the Holman Barnes Group board. Tony Andriaccio, Rick Wade, and David Gilbert, all banned from even entering the club. Those three are apparently taking legal action. There's also apparently a third-party investigation underway. It's a bad look for a club that's where it's at. Gary, are you as disappointed with all of this as I am, given, we were hoping we'd have new board members, and it's just all turned into a circus again?
But for me, this just highlights the importance of the review that was conducted last year. It highlights why the recommendations were made that were made. Now, hopefully, the fact that the recruitment agency is recruiting the board members, hopefully that is all sorted and these guys can't screw that up at this point. Because that's my worry, and I think that's most people's worry, is what's happening at the Holman Barnes Group is an attempt to wind back the recommendations that look like they've been accepted and put in place. My hope is the constitutional changes that needed to happen to appoint the new independent board, that all that's gone through, and this mess going on at the Holman Barnes Group is irrelevant to any of that. But the one thing I do want to say, and it's not just the Holman Barnes Group, it's the West Magpies, it's the Balmain Tigers. Sort your mess out. Like, I'm over these guys coming in, guys who haven't been really involved in rugby league in any way, and guys who look like they have been dug up in some fossilized pit of dinosaurs from, like, this needs to get sorted. I'm sick of you guys getting our club dragged through the mud for your inability to act professionally and control a narrative of what's going on in your club. I'm happy for the Holman Barnes Group to sit there and run West Ashfield and the other clubs, the Balmain Leagues Club when it's up and running. I'm happy for those guys to sit on their board and run those clubs. If you want to have input into the West Tigers in a meaningful manner, if you think you should be on the board of the West Tigers, then you're wrong. Like, you've shown over the past 10 years that the structure we had in place for our club was not successful. The club was ran into the ground. So my message to the Holman Barnes Group, Balmain Tigers and West Magpies, get these independents in place, let them run in the West Tigers, you run the leagues clubs, you run your football clubs. If you don't want to do that, then get out of the way. Like, sell the place. I'm quite happy for the Holman Barnes Group to own the West Tigers, and I think they can be a really good mechanism for change when our club's performing poorly. If we get to a situation where the board's underperforming like it was in the past, I think the Holman Barnes Group and Balmain Tigers and West Magpies can be a really good mechanism to enforce that change at board level. But if you think your role is any more than that in the club, then I don't want you as part of our club. I don't want the Holman Barnes Group owning the club if you want to overstep that kind of mark. So it's time to get it sorted out. It's time to get these recommendations in place, and it's time to allow our club to move forward.
One thing I will say, that just remarking or replying to what you say there, Gary, it's all very well for the directors of Holman Barnes Group to run West Ashfield and run their different clubs, but these guys, this whole cabal of people, they're not interested in club meals and poker machines. They're in these positions because of the rugby league team. They all have a history of being strong, intently Western Suburbs Magpies fans, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they're here because of the rugby league. They're here because of the football. They're here because of stand behind the glass at the ground, and they're here because they love the power trip of being involved in top grade rugby league. And I will say that all of these people, certainly the majority of these people, have been directors or involved in this organisation for some of them for 4 or 5 decades. And it's just ridiculous because they all come with a legacy from one of the sides of the joint venture, and that's okay, but we need some fresh blood. We need some new ideas. And to see them fighting out, and these guys have all known each other for 4 or 5 decades, and they're still at it and they're still going at each other. It's just time to move on. It's time to rejuvenate the way that this club is officiated and what happens at the board level amongst the owners of the club and the West Tigers Football Club. It's just an absolute joke, and it's ridiculous. And I don't think you'd find a West Tigers fan that has any faith in them. And that's from the most loyal fan and the most engaged fan to the person in the street who follows the West Tigers. They have lost us in terms of having any faith in their ability to be able to run the club and make the right decisions. And the infighting and all of this rubbish just has to stop once and for all.
Yeah, my hope with the recommendations that were made last year, and from the outside looking in, I think the goal with those recommendations is to create a buffer between those ownership groups and the running of the West Tigers. I think that's crucially important. That's why we need the independent directors. That's why we needed the change in the board. And that needs to exist. That buffer, that gap. You can still go and get the corporate hospitality at West Tigers games. All that sort of stuff is still there. But there needs to be that buffer between the ownership group and the board. And that's what the recommendations set out. And that's what I hope we see. And I hope the fact that as I said earlier, the fact that we're interviewing for directors, I hope that means that's all in place and it's all finalised. And what we want is in the future, these squabbles between the Holman Barnes Group and Balmain, because Balmain came out and caused a mess a couple of months ago as well. And we've had messes with the Magpies and between the Magpies and West Tigers in the past 2 years. So that's all the ownership groups have been involved in some kind of, at board level, some kind of issue with our club. It's time that we get a buffer. So if the Holman Barnes Group, for example, has this little squabble that they're having at the moment, it's removed from the West Tigers. That's what we want. We don't want this infighting and this pettiness that it looks like from the outside looking in to affect our club anymore, because it's affected our club for too long. Our club has been held back by Western Suburbs versus Balmain for too long. It's time to be a modern-day professional sporting organisation with a board that is set up with the best interests of West Tigers at heart, not what was best for my old club that hasn't existed for the past 25 years.
Yeah.
It's West Tigers now, and that's what we need.
Correct. So just to clarify, those board members, the independent board directors that were apparently in the process of being appointed is for the West Tigers board. I would make the point very strongly to the Holman Barnes Group that what a shame that you have this form of board, that you have such a dysfunctional board, because the Holman Barnes Group, as far as I'm concerned, and we're getting off track a little bit, has all of the potential in the world, but seems to be hamstrung by these fossils, Gary, that you mentioned. That what were they, coming from the tar pits? Was that what you said?
I don't know. I think I stole Eddie's rant, so I don't rant that often.
You need to find an archaeologist to find them. Exactly. All right, boys, we've had a few rants there. There's been some optimism to start the show, a little bit of annoyance to end the show. And Eddie, you'll be back for the next edition of the West Tigers podcast, because I'm having a break from hosting for a little bit. Over to you, my friend.
Joel won't be back until March.
He's
Exactly.
On a cruise.
Yes, correct.
I was just going to ask the boys, just one buy, sell, and hold for tonight, boys. I'm going to take over for the last 2 minutes.
Do it.
Would you make Lockie Galvin a 10-year deal, which would make him, by the end of that deal, the richest player in the NRL? Steve, buy, sell, or hold?
Buy it tomorrow. He needs to be locked in. I'm stealing your words, Eddie, so I'll give you credit. You're the one who said it. All this great work that's happening recruitment-wise is going to fall on its backside if he doesn't get locked down long term.
You can see, like Gary, I can see what Phil Gould is lavishing with praise, and that's true. But he's also angling for him to come to the Bulldogs. I'm
100%.
sure he's called him the best teenager of all time. He's also said
he's already met with him.
By the end of his career, he'll be the highest earning player in rugby league history. So he is setting him up, saying, "Welcome. There's the welcome mat. Come to Canterbury. There'll be the Roosters. There'll be other sides." So I don't know what Kalen Ponga is on, whether he's on a percentage of the salary cap, but could you offer him a deal like that, saying, "Lockie, you can be 8% of our salary cap, whatever the salary cap is for the next 10 years." I don't know the percentages if that's right, but would that be something we could consider, Gary, to keep him?
For me, I think we've got to use what our competitive advantage that we have right now. And our competitive advantage right now is we can upgrade him next year. So we can upgrade him next year. We can upgrade him the year after on the condition that he signs a long-term deal. Now, I don't know if that long-term deal is 10 years, but it's whatever you need to do to get him to sign that contract. So, I think he's on probably around that 300 mark for next year and maybe a little bit more for the year after. If you're pushing that $800 to $1 million for next year, that makes a massive difference to a young man's life right now. So that's your starting point. So you start with the next 2 years, and then you see how far you can get him to extend for on top of those 2 years. He doesn't get that. He doesn't get that upgrade if there's no extension. The only way he can get that upgrade is by extending long term at our club. Now, 10 years is an awfully long time, but whatever it takes to get him to sign up for the next 5, 6 years, if you have to extend it out after that, then you do that. So, but I think our competitive advantage against other clubs right now is the fact that we can make a very big difference to what he's earning in the next
Are you
2
confident, Gary, though, that it could happen before, say, the ball's been kicked this year? Because I think, knowing his manager, he'll just wait because every club in the game is going to be after him.
Yeah, I would love to get it done. I'd be doing whatever I could to get it done. I think there should be enough evidence now that we're on the improve. Like, if he's, all the talk that he's going to wait around and see how we're going next year, I think there's enough evidence in the signings, and especially if you can couple that with, say, signing a Hetherington for 2026, that the club is moving in the right direction. I think there's enough evidence there that you should be able to sell that to Lockie and his management. And you're right about who his manager is, and that being an issue. And I think it has the potential to really drag out, and especially as we get towards November next year, could be a real issue for the club. So I'd like to see us get it done before the season starts. I can't say I'm overly confident that will happen, but I think we have to use that competitive advantage that we have right now.
Richardson did say he was the guy that you build the club around.
He said that about Stefano, though, didn't he, as well? It's his biggest challenge now for me. Obviously, sorting out Barnes and all that, it's more wide-ranging, but this is the 10-year player. This is the superstar in the NRL coming up in the next 10 years. We just can't lose him.
I was going to say the Taumalolo deal for 10 years, $1 million a year. I mean, that's an indication that sometimes it doesn't work in a club's favour. But I think if you're going to do it for somebody, it's going to be Galvin. I would break the rule for Galvin to just get it settled and sorted, Gary.
I used that as an argument a few months ago, Joel. I said, that showed that maybe 10 years is not wise, but I just think this kid is so good. He's just gonna be one of the legends of the game. We have to do it.
It's interesting. There's still amongst the fan base, there's still a fair bit of conversation around his position. There's still a lot of people who see him as a guy that's going to transition into that lock or that back row.
Yeah, brilliant.
For me, I think he's a guy he's going to be a bigger 5'8", but you have a look at a guy like Nathan Cleary. Nathan Cleary's probably bigger than most halfbacks I've ever seen, but he uses that size. That's part of his game, and I really think Galvin has the opportunity to really take that 5'8" role to another level, because I think he's going to have that size, but I don't think he's going to be overly slow. And what I saw in the development of his ball playing last year, I have real confidence that his game's just going to keep going to another level.
I reckon, Gary, some teams will try and sign him as a halfback. chief ball player. Like Phil Gould said, like Brad Fittler and that when they were young, they weren't really taking control. Maybe it was the nature of our side, but he was not playing 5'8" at times last year. He was playing like on ball, dominant ball.
Yeah, the ball was going to him pretty much whenever he wanted it, and a lot of times it was at first receiver. A lot of times, the big thing for me is I don't see him as being the quickest player, but he's one of the quickest players I've ever seen at getting into position early. And that's the real strength for me. And as a playmaker, the amount of times you see him switch from side to side, and he'll be on the right for a play, and then the next play, he's over on the left side so early. He's telling the players around him, like Sam Fainu, where he wants him to run, what hole he wants him to hit. And that's the real strength that he has for me. He's not the quickest player, but boy, does he get into position early and really quick.
You can look at the loss of Tedesco and the significant impacts that's had on the club for years. You know, that's probably the biggest dark moment in the club's history. We've had a few, but losing Tedesco and the ramifications that had for the club, we cannot afford to let that happen again here with Galvin.
And I think he's listened to those comments from Andrew Johns about what it could mean to be the guy that leads the West Tigers from last to being where they should be again. And I think that is of interest to him. So I'd be selling that incredibly hard with him. Like, you just got to keep selling that message. And you got to do it with all those young guys, because we have a group of young guys from that Macarthur region, and keep pointing them to what happened at Penrith. You have a look at those young guys that all came through at Penrith, and they made their hometown club into a 4-time premiership winner. And that's the story we need to be selling these young guys, especially Galvin, to get them to commit to this club long term, because they do have the potential. With a guy like Luai at the club and Terrell May, we're getting a forward pack. They do have the chance to put this club just into the top 8. Will make a huge difference to this fan base. So there's a huge opportunity there for him.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see what unfolds. Unfortunately, I hate to put my negative hat on, but I do remember Fittler playing for Penrith and ending up at the Roosters and how that all transpired. And sometimes I think, you know, because you do get like that as a fan. You do know that the big clubs typically get what they want, but I hope this is the one time that doesn't happen, not just for West Tigers, but for the game. Gary, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I look at that Penrith situation a little bit differently, because there was a pretty big tragedy involved in kind of the breakdown of that 91-92 Penrith side, and I'm hopeful that we can look at more recent Panthers kind of commitment to their club and sell that vision, because I have no doubt that the Roosters and many other clubs are going to be looking at Lockie Galvin and already looking at him.
100%.
So we need to get it sorted.
Alrighty, thank you guys. We'll see you next year, Eddie.
Sorry, I was just in the middle of another coffee fit. I don't know if I'll make it next year.
That's right, exactly.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, boys.
Thanks, boys.